No, Mary Lou, we are live and I'm excited. I think we are true friends now.
I
We
think
have,
so.
yeah, we've connected several times. I've been on your podcast recently. You're coming on the Books4Guys podcast. I feel like we have a weekly standing get together at this point.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. We have some great conversations and it's
Mhm.
been really fun to get to know you but today, Mary Lou, this is all about you. You gave me the opportunity to have a platform on your podcast recently, but you just had a new book that came out within the last few months. I think came out in October.
It did,
Um
yes.
called It's Not You, It's the Algorithm, which I think the title alone a lot of people will they already know what it's going to be about. So, but no, I mean, Mary Lou, for those that don't know you and your work, you've written several books, but
Yes.
tell us just a little bit about your story and kind of where it's led you to writing this your latest work.
Yeah. Well, one of my earliest memories is of actually writing. I picked up a crayon or a pencil. My father was a high school physics teacher. His study was full of the tests that he would administer to his students. And I early on was drawn to teaching and writing and books and listening. In fact, my earliest Christmas list, my mother kept a list of all the gifts that everybody received. We'd open them one at a time on Christmas morning. And when I was 2 years old, I received three albums, The Little Engine That Could, The Lollipop Tree, and The Babar and Celeste Story. And so from a very, very young age, I've been attuned to language and listening and words and the power of words and music. My father was an audiophile. He had a huge, huge collection of vinyl albums. And then he got into CDs and cassette tapes. And he was just starting to pick up streaming when he died 4 years ago. But I loved how I watched him particularly love books, love reading, love the intellectualism of ideas. And so from a very young age, Chris, I remember being 5 years old and playing school with my stuffed animals and knowing as a 5-year-old can that I was going to be a teacher and a writer someday. And I've done both. Now, the teaching came first, and I attempted to pitch some early books that I thought were worthy back in the day before the internet. And I just got the proverbial file of rejection letters. And so I set that aside and really focused on my family. By that time, I had two young kids and continued to teach. Well, fast forward when Amazon came out with Create Space, which is dating me back in, I think, '09, maybe 2010, and offered this self-publishing platform, I thought, wow, this is it. This puts it into the hands of indies like me. And I just started that process. And so here we are in almost 2026. I have 7 books. I've helped a dozen people write and publish their first books and get them out into the world. And that journey alone has been immensely rewarding. And when I get a note from somebody who read a book, or I'm invited to speak, or like you, just we connect because we both share a love of reading and books and what they can do for our minds and also improve our lives. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Amazon. I'm learning a lot
Yes.
about that time frame of Amazon when writers could self-publish and put their work out on that platform
Mhm.
and how much it helped them grow and being able to sell their work and really go from not having a chance at all, getting rejected from certain publishing organizations to all of a sudden having hundreds of thousands of people maybe purchase their book or read it. And how cool is that? Because I haven't published a book, but the more authors I've talked to, they were like, that time frame when Amazon allowed me to do that was like it was like the dot-com era where there was a chance for writers to have a way to get their work. How cool is that? Like, did you have a moment where you were like, "Holy cow, like, I'm selling my book and
Yes.
I would have never been able to do this without this platform."
I did have that moment, and I remember it distinctly. It was the day my first box of books arrived at my house, and my son was home at the time. Not sure where my daughter was, but I brought the box in, I put it on the dining room table, and I said, "Ben, help me open this." So we opened it together, and I held my first book for the first time, and I'll tell you, it still gives me chills remembering that. For anybody who's a parent, you know what that feeling is like when your baby first arrives and you hold your baby, and it is very close, holding a book, and
Yeah,
even after, my 7th book that just, as you mentioned, came out in October, I still get that feeling
yeah,
when you open the box and you see and hold and flip the pages for the first time and say, "I did it. It's here. Look at this."
yeah. That's incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it doesn't get old when you put your work out there and you're able to hold a physical copy or somebody say they read or listened to it. I can only imagine you're like, "Yes, this is awesome."
Yeah, you absolutely.
Yeah. Well, kind of going to your latest book, It's Not You, It's the Algorithm. I'm curious to know because obviously you probably had just some interest, some frustration, some curiosity that led you to research and want to put this writing together and to share with others. What was the process of just how you decided, why you decided to put this together and write this book?
So, going back a year from beginning of 2025, for the first time in 15 years of being an online creative entrepreneur, I was not excited about the year ahead. I felt overwhelmed. I felt burned out. I felt frustrated. You use that word, that here I had been working so hard for so long and doing all the things and having some success. Certainly, I've grown my network immensely. I'm grateful for that. And I had, over the last couple of years, I had put out 2 books of poetry, which I was very committed to supporting, and I was finding that people were resonating with poetry again and enjoying live readings and interacting with the themes, and so that was my goal, but I was burned out and frustrated with the online scene, and I had told my friend Tracy that we always have a kickoff call at the beginning of the year. She asked me, "What are you gonna write this year?" And I said, "I'm not." And that was beginning of January. End of January came along and all of a sudden, Chris, the download came. And for anybody who's watching or listening this who writes or creates it in any way, you probably get that. When the download comes, you pay attention. And I thought, okay, I guess the universe has other plans for me. So I did. I just listened. And I realized as I got deeper into the writing process that this was a book I had been working on for several years, and I had all these pieces here and there, and so it became more of a process of putting all those pieces together and articulating a collective grief and frustration that I was noticing others having. I was seeing stuff show up on my social feed. I was in conversations with people. I was hearing it. This sense of we've been at this so long and nobody's getting anywhere. The only people who are winning are very, very small minority. And it's easy to blame yourself, like, "Oh, if I just worked a little harder, right? If I had just taken that one more course or whatever." And that's not it at all. The system, and again, I can say this now very confidently, the system is not rigged in our favor. It just isn't. The algorithm is programmed like a casino, and the house always wins. The house always wins. So all of us who here, they're like, "Hey, come on in. Hey, we'll give you this free space. You don't have to pay. You can post whatever you want." But guess what? We're going to bury anything we don't think matters or takes anybody off of this platform. That was the other thing. I had built my house online on my website and I was getting nothing. And so I then said, "Okay, well, you use the social platforms to drive traffic." No, social platforms kibosh that instantly because they don't want people leaving their platform. So we're in this strange time where more and more people are waking up to the way the system is, the reality of the system. I'm not anti-tech, I make that very clear in the beginning of the book, but I am anti-autopilot, and I am anti people not paying attention to their life, and that's the subtitle of the book is How to Slow Your Scroll and Start Paying Attention to Your Life Again. Because another pattern I was noticing in myself as well as others is phone addiction. And we all have it. Every single one of us is addicted to our phone. Now, there are degrees of addiction, like any spectrum, but it felt good for me to actually say that out loud and write it down and show the progression of how did this happen? You know, we are intelligent people, and yet here we are looking around going, "Why am I buried in Instagram's basement again for the
Yeah.
last 2 hours? This
Yeah.
has done nothing for my life."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that may be a little bit longer explanation, but really that's how the book came to be, and
Yeah.
here it is.
Yeah. No, it is frustrating. I feel dumber every time I spend 10 minutes scrolling, and I know I shouldn't be doing it. I feel like I do a fairly good job of, I don't know, I see people scrolling and I'm like, I'm not scrolling right now. I'm better than them. I'm smarter than them, but then I find myself later looking through it again and I'm like, oh, this is so frustrating.
Yes.
But you're right. It's almost like something like at this point, you're forced to have to participate.
Yes.
Especially if you're trying to build something. It obviously, there are a lot of people that just they're sucked in entertainment-wise, and they're getting no value. They're just wasting away time in their hours in each day. But then there are others who, even like myself with Books4Guys, you're trying to build in yourself with
Mhm.
your business. You're
Mhm.
trying to build something meaningful, and you have to use YouTube and Instagram
Mhm.
and podcast platforms and LinkedIn, and you have to post because you've got to get people to recognize what you're doing, and that's really the only way to get it out there, at this point. So you do have to use these tools, but you're advocating to be smart about that
Yes.
and take an overall view of what's good and where you're maybe crossing the line of losing your production and becoming a little more in the cycled system where you're not getting a benefit anymore. And so that's tough because everyone's a little bit
Mhm.
different in where they're at with this, but you're 100% correct. I think if you polled a million people would say like, yes, I have a problem with this. And it's tough to figure out how to deal with it.
And I wanted to provide in the book a way forward because I'm a
Mhm.
builder. So I make it clear that yes, these systems are here. No, we are not going back to pre-internet times, and throwing your phone out doesn't make sense because we have everything is on the phone now, from
Right.
banking to communicating with people who are important to consuming content that does help you build your business. So again, I do want to make it clear to your audience that I am not advocating for some pre-internet time where people are handwriting letters and using a fax machine. It's more, I provide some options for thinking differently about the systems, becoming aware of what's really going on, because awareness is the first step. So really look at your own life and look at your own habits and ask yourself every time you do open your phone, why am I going in here? That's one of my big questions that I have to say that to myself every day. Why are you opening your phone? Is it habitual because you're bored, because you have 5 minutes, you're sitting at a traffic light? Is it you're standing in line at the grocery store? Why not instead don't go to your phone and just be present in the moment? Let your head go crazy for a little bit. And I've talked to people who say that's really uncomfortable because they've become so accustomed to just automatically opening, well, let me watch something on YouTube or let me check my email really quick. That's no way to live. So again, I'm providing options for moving forward. What can we build in the next 5 years of the 2020s so that we reduce some of this angst that
Yeah.
is growing
Yeah.
without tossing what's been built out the window, because that we all know that doesn't work,
Yeah.
but we're gonna have to do this together, and that's really where my book leads is, let's build something different
Yeah.
together that works better for more of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was even thinking, even outside of like the social platforms, even just text messages to where you're constantly connected with people. My mom, my friends, they can, I guess used to you had one landline. If you weren't home, you didn't answer, and you didn't have this constant access to people. And I
Yeah.
find myself even more than the social account stressed out to respond to text, at all
Yes.
days. And I'm like, really, I could respond to this tomorrow, instead of every time a text comes through, I respond. I'm like, oh, it'd be so nice actually if people could only reach me at this time, if I could just block that out and, love you, mom, but I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a funny way, but while it's good to be connected, there's also those downsides too, where it constantly keeps me opening my phone and checking it. What are some of your, I don't know, some of the things that you discovered that helped you personally in being able to find the balance between building what you're trying to build, but also create those boundaries to where it helps you stop scrolling and be more present in your everyday life with the people that are important and just, or just in your surroundings? What are some of the things that you've personally done and maybe recommend?
Yeah. I Well, I just shared one of the questions is I've trained myself to ask, "Why are you going into your phone right now?"
That's great.
And that alone has made me more aware of how much I reach for it. A funny story, at the end of October, I was flying back from the West Coast to New York, and made a stop in Salt Lake City to work with my speaking coach, and he took me to the airport when I was heading home, and my phone fell out of my pocket into his car, and I didn't know it until I was in the TSA line, and I couldn't find my phone. And like a lot of us now, my boarding pass is on my app.
Phone.
And for about an hour, I had massive panic attack. I literally was sweating. I was close to tears several times. I went back to curbside, which is where I checked my luggage. It wasn't there. I retraced my steps. No phone on the ground. I thought, well, I have two things are going to come from this. One, it's in John's car and I'll get it back. Or two, I'm going to have to start over. And for, like I said, about an hour from the time I got through TSA, because I got a paper boarding pass, thank goodness for the backup, right? To the time I got onto the plane, I scrambled with using a courtesy phone in the airport to call my son to see if he could find I don't know anybody's phone numbers except
Yeah.
my son's, my daughter's, my own, my ex-husband, my ex-boyfriend, and my
Yeah.
mom. Those are
Yeah.
the only ones I know by heart. And the whole experience, Chris, made me hyper aware of how much I do reach for my phone throughout the day. And what was interesting is that entire flight, long story short, I was able to find out from borrowing my flight mate, the guy who was sitting in the aisle, he let me use his phone to text my son. And through a series of communications, John told my son he had my phone. So I was able to relax on the flight knowing I was going to get it back. It was a 4-hour flight from Salt Lake to New York. That's the first time I've been on a flight since probably the mid 2000s without a phone to
Yeah.
look at. And it was weird. It was weird. So, what that did for me was really accentuate the need to be asking myself that question, why are you reaching for your phone? What could you be doing instead? And this is another question that I made bookmarks for my book for people who like early readers. And on one side, there's a question that says, who deserves more of my attention right now than my phone? That question alone, if listeners could train themselves to ask themselves that, who deserves or what? Who or what deserves more of my attention right now than my phone? Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to go just sit for 10 minutes with nothing. Maybe you need to uh, write in your journal. Maybe you need to make something healthy to eat or go to the grocery store or something that doesn't involve the phone. Now, if the answer is, I need to call my mom, Now we're in that gray area, right? Because but here's the difference. You're intentionally calling your mother. You're not just reaching for your phone and interacting with it with no agenda, just out of habit, like, oh, what's in here? Oh, I'm gonna go on Instagram. Oh, what's on TikTok? Or whatever. And that's what I think so many of us are struggling with is the chaos that comes from constantly having our attention siphoned off in these little ways. We don't think it's big, but at the end of the day, it adds up. Like, what did I do today? Oh, I watched. What did I even watch? I don't even know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
I
it's
don't know if that
interesting.
helps, but
No,
it's helped
yeah. I
me.
mean, even when you call somebody, you almost gotta, like, put it on speaker and put your phone away because you can scroll while talking to
Yes.
someone and do 2 things at once and totally
No.
be checked out. But you were making me laugh. I'm gonna give my buddy Joe a shout out on this because his is the only phone number that I know from memory because as kids, I had to call he was the first friend with a cell phone, and so anytime his the only phone number I know. I don't even know if I think I know my wife's, but I always joke with him. I'm like, "Man, if I ever go to jail, you're the one phone call I'm calling because I won't know
Bail
anyone
me out.
else's." I was like, "Man, be ready if you ever get a weird number calling you." But it's funny though, you used to have to remember phone numbers.
Yes.
You didn't just have them automatically in your contacts on your phone. But yeah, it's so tough, but I do think, and we kinda talked a little bit about this just vaguely on your podcast. I think people are realizing this issue that there is a problem. They don't feel good about it. They don't feel good scrolling all day. They don't feel good at night when they're done and they're just like, "What did I just do?" I think people are aware, which like you said, that's the first step. Become aware,
Mhm.
realize, that this is an issue, needs to be corrected. It's just interesting, and there's been documentaries put out now too about how, these companies have tried to gain your attention, and that's the whole purpose of the platform is keep your eyes in their app and whatnot. But it will be interesting to see if what major changes can take place to help kind of flip the script. I think people are aware there are some little tricks that I try, that you try to kind of help balance out this roller coaster we've been going down, like you said, for 20 years, having your phone with you on an airplane. But it'll be interesting to see what can be implemented to help on a grander scale. I know there's the do not disturbs now. I know a lot of my friends put that
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
and they try really hard not to answer after 7 or 8, put the phone down. I'm trying to do something similar. But you have these contradicting things, when you're trying to build something. It's like, okay, you work your 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9 and 5 to 9, you're working again. So you're
Mhm.
constantly on this. But I do think people, especially I think younger people, are kind of getting, maybe a little annoyed with just the attention that these platforms take from you at all hours of the day. And hopefully there's some things that can be created and maybe we'll see some grander action against, not I hate to use against, but just to kind of balance out that time that it's taking from you and the more
Yeah.
important things other than your
Yes.
phone. And so, but I think your book is also another one of those reasons where it's like, yeah, it's just a reminder. Hey, this is happening. You need to try and balance this out and correct this. And so I just think you putting that work out there is extremely important. It's great that you've written this and put that out there for people to see and better understand what's going on.
Yeah, my goal outside of making sense of things for myself, which is what all writers are doing when you write anything, you're sifting and sorting through your own mind and your own thoughts, is I wanted to provide language for people who sense something isn't right, something's off, and that they could see themselves in my story so that they can take action that makes sense for them because there is not a one size fits all answer here. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if we just had the one thing that we could pull out of the bottle and said, "Here it is, everybody. This is what's going to work." It's not because one of the things I was talking with a friend of mine the other day who has two teenage daughters, and he leads some AI initiatives at his work, and he said we were talking about, again, algorithmic influence and the rise of AI and the division around that's going on. So there's all these forces, and you used that word earlier, Chris, that we didn't ask for this, okay? But now but we in order to function within society, there is an expectation that you will participate at some level. And again, that ultimately is up to each person. And some people, like anything, it's a bell curve. You see some people who are completely off grid and they're happy as all get out. And then there's people who are like Uber users who they have like 5 cell phones and 20 monitors and they're plugged in constantly and that's their life. And then most of us fall in that middle. But what my friend brought up to me, which really was one of those little light bulb moments for me, he said, young people like the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha who are coming up and are entering the workforce, they've only known life with the internet, with the cell phone. For them, it's just noise in the background. It's us older generations. I'm a Gen Xer. You're a millennial, I presume, right?
I don't remember what I am.
Yeah, but and then obviously it's the older generations who are having a harder time. And so somehow we, again, part of my mission and vision moving forward is how can we again collectively move forward so that some of these overwhelming problems that are taking up so much bandwidth online right now and so much chatter, instead of just complaining about it, let's build something. Let's start having conversations like the one you and I are having today. That's where it begins. And our personal stories can be, as you advocate in Books for Guys, every book is a story of some kind or another that somebody can read and say, someone else gets it. And I feel less alone, or I feel less frustrated, or I feel less confused about my situation. That's the beauty of a book, and that's the beauty of what you're building with Books for Guys, is getting these, whether it's my book or all the other books that you feature, into the hands of people who are just searching, like you and I are. I'm still searching,
Yeah.
right? I read
Yeah.
all the time because I'm
Yeah.
looking for answers.
Yeah. Well, and as we're doing this around New Year's, I'm sitting here thinking of like resolutions, and it
Sure.
it's a bad thing, when your phone becomes part of the, like, "I need to look at this less in 2026" type of resolution. It's like, "Hey, I need to exercise more." A good thing, "I need to read more." So, promoting, picking up a book, picking up your book, learning something. I need to purposely put the phone down more. I need to scroll less, so you can see just from looking at it from that lens, hey, I need to do
Mhm.
less of this, more of this, so it's a good time that we're having this conversation. Maybe it'll get
Yeah.
people motivated to do more of one thing, less of another in this case. But no. Well, Mary Lou, you've done like so kind of like going to your work in general, because you've written about different things. You've got poetry, leadership, this book about the algorithm. Obviously, you have different interests and passions. How do you determine this kind of seemed pretty organic,
Mhm.
you had an experience, thoughts, you really kind of were frustrated and it led you to putting this out there. What, I guess, do you plan to spend a lot of time speaking on this particular book and having these conversations, or do you have other ideas in the works, for this next year that you're like, hey, this, I don't know if this is going to lead to my next book, but it's certainly something I'm interested in and looking into. But what is your personal short and long term, I don't know, goals or future look like from a content and writing standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, my focus now is really around the themes of this book.
Hmm.
It's we're just getting started again, I think collectively unraveling from a stupor that we were all in. I certainly was. I mean, that's where it begins, is when you have that moment of, "Oh, wow, this has happened to me and I think other people are going through it too." And oh, yeah, they are. And so yes, I my intentions for the next year or for 2026 and beyond are to bring this message to a wider audience, to be a guide forward, to offer some concrete ways of finding more balance in life between the tech, whether it's the phone or it's an iPad or it's the laptop, and analog life, where you're present with people you care about, where you're out in nature or wherever you like to go, doing things that aren't again algorithmically driven. And also I'm very committed to working with people on their own passions and dreams, and whether that's writing. I have taught writing before. I have worked with aspiring authors before. That brings me so much joy to help people bring what's up here into the world because they want that out there, not necessarily to sell, although selling is a part of the equation, but for what it signifies in their life. It's a dream come true, perhaps, or it's a part of their business model that they just haven't gotten into place. One of the in what's interesting about writing "It's Not You, It's the Algorithm" that I discovered was that having a podcast, writing a book, building a website that's yours, that no one else controls but you, where the content that you put on there, whether it's a portfolio of your art or your music or your writing or whatever it may be, your videos, is still the really what you want to be focused on is create assets that you own. Because the social platforms, as great as they are for delivery, that's what they are. They're delivery trucks, but they're not the goods within the delivery truck. So, I'm committed to helping people understand that difference so that they don't get lost in always being in the delivery truck and not building enough assets to deliver, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense, and actually, that's a great analogy, um, and I think it's great that you're focused on because there's an unlimited amount of work and people you can reach with this book and your and just your ideas and motivation and mission to kind of get people to become aware of this. And so I think it's fantastic that you're not rushing to the next project like we always do. I think there's
Yeah.
so much, there's so much to give with this current book and to be able to
Yeah.
speak on. I think the more hopefully this conversation leads to opportunities for you to be able to share that more and broadcast again that motivation and idea and mission to become aware and how we can better balance this out. So yeah, I love your analogy there of not getting caught up in the delivery, but build something and use that as your personal delivery, as you work to create something and control be more interested in your own work and
Yeah.
life than other people's, That's kind of another one of the thing I'm always like, "Why am I so invested in this person's life over here?" They do not know me, they don't care, and I'm over here just like, "Can you believe so and so did this?"
We all do that.
Yeah, so your analogy obviously resonates with myself, even being aware of this, so again, I know so many others are gonna hear that and be like, "Huh, great point?"
Yeah.
So, no, I think it's extremely important what you're doing. I love that that's your outlook for the near and long-term future, at least 2026, being able to share that message more and have it broadcasted out there. And I think it'll make a big difference.
Yeah, I think so. We're at a really pivotal time right now because this year is ending. And for a lot of people, it was a very strange year,
Yeah, agree.
2025. Um, I think as we move into 2026 and beyond, that growing awareness about where we've been, what we really want, and what we imagine things can be. It's gonna take a group of us, and I'm so grateful that you are doing what you're doing, Chris, that you invited me on today to talk about not just my book, but books in general and ideas, and that you were willing to share some of your own, the conflict that we all feel because that thing is extremely seductive, and, I'm open with people as I still have an active Instagram account, and I do go on there, but I have set a time limit for myself, and when it pops up, most of the time I log off, sometimes I override it, but I think, again, it's baby steps, it's one make as we head into a new year and people are thinking about their intentions and their resolutions and their goals, pick a couple that are a little bit beyond your comfort zone, but are not so far out there that you're like, "Well, I'm just gonna quit within 2 weeks."
Yeah.
right, with the phone. And again, if it's just that one question, who or what deserves more of my attention right now than my phone? If you carry that through the year, see what kind of difference it makes. I bet it's made a big difference to me.
Yep. I think a lot of people would notice maybe some happier time in life, more intentional learning. And I think a lot of people will find that as a very beneficial question. I'm going to train my brain. I'm actually going to make a note of that, that I can actually see pop up on my phone each morning as a reminder. I think that's what I'm going to
That's a
do.
great idea.
Yeah, and that way it pops up as a on my calendar what's more important, than this. And so hopefully that'll help transition my brain as, in the early part of the year. Maybe I won't need that reminder as we get going after a while. Well, Mary Lou, I've got one more question for you. And I
Okay.
ask everybody this that comes on the podcast because I love to know and I'm interested in what people are reading and what they're learning about. So just for you personally, what is a book or two that has had a big impact on you? Like I said, personally or professionally, when someone comes to you and asks for a good book recommendation, what's a book or two that you like to recommend to others?
So, my favorite Stephen Pressfield book, I'm a huge fan, anything by Stephen Pressfield, but if you only picked one, I love The War of Art.
Mm,
That was the first book of his I read, and it changed my life. I was introduced to that book in 2014, so 11 years ago. It's on my shelf. I refer to it. I have it on audio as well. That book alone really opened my eyes to why, as a creative person, I sometimes struggle. And it's not just for creative people, though. It's for anybody who's building anything of value, a family, a business, a house, a body, right? If you're into fitness and you wanna get more fit, lean, muscular, whatever. It's an amazing book. I love The War of Art. And then I'm a huge fan of Mary Oliver, poet. Her book I have several of her books. The title of her big one, where there's a whole bunch in there, is eluding me at this point, but anything by Mary Oliver can kind of bring me in. And then I'm gonna share one more because it's on my morning routine as I journal every morning, 3 pages by hand, and then I read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act: A Way of Being. I believe that's the title. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. People who don't know Rick Rubin, he founded Def Jam Records back in the '80s, was instrumental in almost every musical act you could think of, from the Beastie Boys to early hip hop artists all the way into the 21st century. And now he's got a great podcast, and he put this book out a couple years ago, and I I read a section of that every morning.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll have to add that to my list going into this next year. That one sounds
it's
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Well, yeah, well, I'll certainly add all of those to my want to reads list. I always joke, I'm like, man, this list, how am I going to get through this? I've got to figure out a way to become just a full-time reader.
Well, here's a secret. Now, here's a little bit of a conflict. I listen to a lot of books because I
Yeah.
love to listen. That is an intentional thing. So I do have the Audible app on my phone, and authors often get a 2 for 1 with me because 'cause I'll buy their physical book, but I'll also buy their audiobook. And I find that when I want to listen as I'm walking or when I'm in driving, I don't listen to the radio or anything like that. I'm always listening to a podcast or listening to a book, and I do listen to the same thing over and over again because, yes, there's a ton of books out there, and I'm not against reading new ones. In fact, you recommended a couple to me that I wrote down that are on my list, and sometimes hearing the same author over and over again, it's the same thing they wrote because it doesn't change, but you're different, and so you hear it
Yep.
differently, and
Yep.
that's how it integrates.
Yep. I love that point. That's why I like to know if people are reading things 2 and 3 and 4 times, because 'cause I've had several
Yes.
people say like, "Hey, when I read it 10 years ago, it meant this. When I read it 5 years ago,
Yes.
it meant this. When I read it today, it means something different." And so it, as I kinda grow and become more seasoned, I'm realizing things mean different things depending on what stage of life you're in or what's going
Mhm.
on. and a book can be timeless. You know, it can have an impact over a long time, which is another really cool thing to have. That's why I love having physical copies of those particular books because I'll be like, oh, I haven't read this in a while, and I'll read it, and I'm like, oh man, forgot about this, or hey, this means something different today. So I love that you say that because you're not the only one that has brought that point up. When you find something you really like, reading it over and over, how it has
Mhm.
different, I don't know, some different context or different meanings depending on that particular time of life. So that's really cool. But Mary Lou, I thank you so much for doing this. And we've got your book. It's Not You, It's the Algorithm on the website. We're gonna promote it, read it. We'll probably try and do some book giveaways for it in the early part of the year for anyone listening. And so be on the lookout for that, as I think it's a good one for people to start the new year with. So I'm really excited about that. But Mary Lou, thank you for doing this. Can't wait to follow just all you accomplish with it too, and just to see the things you're able to do and where you're able to speak and coach about it. And so thank you for taking the time to write the book and thank you for taking the time to come on here and talk about it today.
Thank you, Chris. It was my pleasure and an honor.
Absolutely. Well, this is always fun. So we'll have to continue doing this and all the work that you produce from here on out. We're going to have a conversation about it because you're one of my favorite people to talk to. So we're going to we're going to keep these conversations going.